Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Editor's Note. And in today's edition, I'm very pleased to have Dr. Rafael Bardaji join us again. It's good to have you. And
Thank you for having me.
for all those who are not familiar, formerly the National Security Advisor of Spain, CEO of Worldwide Strategy, and a long list of other positions. You're here, obviously, for various meetings with top officials, discussions from the strategic level all the way to the tactical and operational. Right now, looking at the situation, what comes to mind?
Well, first of all, I think is the reassumption of military operations in Gaza against Hamas. I think after the ceasefire that was used by Hamas, as was expected from the very beginning, to regroup, to rearm, to prepare also offensive action against Israel, once again, I think it was unavoidable that some kind of military counteraction should be taking place. Unfortunately, it's having the effect in the country that is divided politically because of the issue of the kidnapped people in Gaza and the return of all the hostages. But we need to understand that the hostages are the only guard left in the hands of Hamas. So no military action will endanger more than just what Hamas has been doing in the past. And the willingness of Hamas to release those hostages without any military pressure is near to zero. So yes, it's a nightmare for the government and for the IDF, but I think it's unavoidable that in order to get a better deal, if possible, Israel has to resume activities and let the Gazans and the Hamas leadership know that they cannot win this war, whatever they say.
The moment Israel decided to relaunch the war, of course, came in the point where both Israel's intelligence community at large, but also the ISA in particular, were looking at the commander of the current Hamas military wing, the Zaldin al-Qassam, under Mohammed Deif, not Mohammed Deif, but Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of Yahya Sinwar, who was, of course, eliminated a couple of months ago. He was preparing everything on the ground for resumption of war. They understood that he's procrastinating and is actually preparing to launch, according to concrete intelligence, something similar to the October 7th massacre, trying to breach the borders of Gaza and once again contaminating the lands with another massacre. But really, within that context, we're looking now at the international community, the United Nations, various other Western countries immediately condemning Israel for, relaunching the high-intensity warfare, which is not necessarily high intensity, but going in that direction, and claiming breaches of international law, which is unfounded, since international law is very concrete on those matters. What can you tell us about that?
Well, first of all, I think, yes, everyone seems to be an expert lately on international law and the laws of warfare. But I think, as far as I saw it when I visited Gaza in last year, and all the visit I made to the forces involved in the Gaza operations, Israel, IDF, and Israel government has been respecting all the laws that I know from the very beginning. Some people say, well, yes, there are civilian casualties. There have been attacks on civilian targets, but that's not forbidden by the laws of warfare, as far as they are legitimate military targets because they have been used by the enemy. The same happens with humanitarian aid. Israel is not obliged by law to provide humanitarian aid if they feel that this humanitarian aid is being used or abused by the enemy in their favor for military gains, which is happening in Gaza from the very beginning.
Right.
So I think that's important to remind all the viewers that, yes, Israel is allowing themselves all action under the international law and respecting the laws of the warfare period. The good and the different issue here is that there is a different American administration now in power. And President Trump is not constrained by the self-imposed limits that the Biden administration put in place against the ability of Israel to defend itself. And I think the Hamas need to put that into equation. I'm not calling for the whole destruction of Gaza, but I think Hamas has to be aware that if they don't comply with the goals of returning the hostages as soon as possible, all alive and bodies to recover, they will face punishment and they will face catastrophic consequences. No? And one of them is through military force. There is no other alternative nowadays, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Well, we will soon discuss the strategic context to the situation in the Gaza Strip, also the broader matters related to the Islamic Republic of Iran, Yemen, freedom of navigation in the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, and Israel's northern arena. But before that, I'd like to discuss also, for the sake of TV7 and what we're doing here with our viewers, the fact that we are a donation-based organization providing information that you at home may recognize the times that we're living in, the various developments, tapping down into people with direct access, if not being part of the various establishments here in Israel, the United States, in Europe, and elsewhere. And all of our activities are therefore based on what you as our viewers are able to provide. In other terms, without your donations, we won't be able to produce any productions. We won't be able to have all of our operations, which are vital for not only the activities we're doing on the screen, but also a couple of activities behind the screens. And therefore, I'd like to encourage you. We are in need of a certain amount, north of $30,000 a month, from specifically Truth for the Nations. And therefore, if you're blessed by the content of our programs, I'd like you to take this opportunity to consider, if you're able to do so and have the means to do so, to commit $1,000, even more if it's possible. If less, that's also, of course, necessary. Any penny counts, to say the least, but we need 30 people to be able to commit for that. And we'll see how we can also translate that into the development. Our contract here is about to expire, and we have new opportunities that we're looking at in order to reinvigorate our infrastructure and build up the higher quality. There are necessities from audio all the way to visuals to other things. So go to our website at www.tv7israelnews.com, where you'll be able to donate. And I deeply appreciate, I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight that I deeply appreciate all of you who stood by TV7 Israel throughout the years. We are rapidly approaching 16 years since the founding of TV7 Israel News. So a long time working, a long time in the making, and all of this would not be possible without the generosity of all of you at home, as well as God, who has, of course, blessed this production mightily. But returning to our discussion, Rafael.
Well, let me add, Jonathan, if I may, that having a TV station that presents the truth with all the complexity and nuances of the reality is a social asset that I really encourage the people to support your efforts, because I think in a world where noise, manipulation, and misinformation is so common, having a clear lighthouse and to differentiate between bad and good and evil and God is more necessary than ever.
I appreciate those remarks, and I not because I'm running this place, not because that we're doing this as a big team of many people, but the fact of the matter is, I was watching one of the episodes, I think it was yesterday, and the people there on the show, I was moderating the show and I was doing quality control for the production, also seeing what the comments of the people are. I don't think people realize that everyone who is on our programs is tapped into decision making in one way or another, and actively so.
Mhm.
There are no other channels like this. That is our prerequisite. Unless you're involved in one way or another in reality building, in strategy, in tactical approaches, within the military intelligence community and elsewhere, you're not going to be on the show. So that is a very high standard to pursue. And thank God it's been providing so many people all over the world, millions of people, with the information that is not acquired elsewhere. And that is the uniqueness of what we were able to establish. Again, praise God. But we have 16 minutes and a lot of topics to cover. So let's go with the latest development since this past weekend. The United States had enough of the Iranian axis of evil, particularly also when we're talking about the frustration of international shipping in the strategic strait of Bab el-Mandeb, adjacent to Yemen, the Horn of Africa. Since the 17th of October of 2023, the Houthis have forced the entire international community to divert shipping from the Red Sea and the Suez Canal and such to go around the Cape of Hope at a time when there is droughts in the Panama Canal and the shipping there has also significantly diminished. What are we to take out of all of this? And I am anticipating tectonic shifts to what's currently evolving here in the region.
Yeah, I think you are right pointing out that one of the main elements of the current inflation cycle that we are suffering is because of the Houthi activities negating the pass through Bab el-Mandeb Straits. No? But having said that, I think, again, the Trump administration has made a 100 degrees change in their approach. I think the world has waited too long to counteract the Houthi activities, which are kind of piracy, actually. Not because of the Houthis themselves, but because they thought that Iran was behind all the activities, which is true. The Houthis are just an extension of Iran's strategy in the region. And I think that's important that the military action taken by the US in the last days is only not directed against the Houthi capability to stop the communication through the straits, but also a clear message to Iran. And I think that's also very important to take into consideration and bear in mind, because I think the approach of President Trump and the new administration will produce some changes that we couldn't think about it 4 months ago.
Is this signaling the right messages to not only the Iranians, but the Chinese, who are also eyeing the current developments here in the region? And I would assume, I haven't asked them that directly, but I assume that they look at every action taken and reaction to the various belligerents of the Islamic Republic, which is, let's put it frankly, it's a client state of Beijing.
Yeah, you're right. I think, if you know anything about the United States of America, China is the big strategic rival, if not adversary or enemy in the future. It doesn't matter which aisle of the political spectrum you are. I think there's a general consensus on that. And I think you pointed out correctly that the Chinese are looking very carefully to any actions taken by the American president. Having said that, the Chinese has to put in the balance a cost-benefit analysis, whether to sustain Iran politically and strategically, compensate them in case of a more aggressive posture by the American presidency or not, and that's something that we have to wait and see, But they are not fool, they are not crazy, they are not irrational. So I think they will have to see definitely that they need to rethink the support of the Iranian regime.
Cut their losses since in 2019 they have invested $400 billion for a 25-year contract, which included acquiring basically much of the strategic infrastructure of the Iranians, something that caused at the time to spark many protests in Tehran and elsewhere over the fact that the Ayatollah regime was practically selling Iran for scraps.
That's but it can play both ways. No, having such a big investment in infrastructure, particularly in the energy sector, will also moderate some of the position of the Chinese because they don't want them to be destroyed because Iran act aggressively against the Western wall of the region. So yes, it's a risk, but it's also a card that you can play. And President Trump, for instance, has given ample examples of dealing and know how to negotiate, despite what the people say, and thus I think they will be factoring in, the highest stakes of investment in infrastructure by China, but it can be play against them again, depending on the vulnerabilities and the needs of the oil and everything by China. So yes, but I think that can be solvable.
Let's talk about Iran's nuclear program. You're somewhat of a nuclear expert. Not somewhat, you're actually a nuclear expert. And you've advised many over the years, including the Prime Minister here and others, with regard to the various courses of action that need to be taken. Don't tell us what you're going to advise, but tell us what you would do in the current circumstances of the complexities at hand, since President Donald Trump had already signaled to the Iranians any attack from the Houthis is an attack directly from Iran. And in a phone conversation with Putin just, a couple of days ago, they both came out and made a statement. We both agree that Iran should never acquire nuclear weapons. What are we to take of that? You obviously met both individuals, and both have told you that also personally.
Yes, indeed. I think one of the strategic challenges we are facing today is to decouple again Russia from Iran or Iran from Russia, making Iran more isolated. And I think President Trump is playing that card, kind of reverse Kissinger, and I think it's the right approach. But secondly, I think we need to tell and make clear to the Iranian regime that a nuclear bomb is not going to be allowed at any cost, that the military option is on the table. And yes, a diplomatic solution will be probably better for everyone. But if they keep insisting and enriching and taking all the steps to weaponize the fissile material and mounting in a ICBM, that should be stopped militarily. But we are still in the early stages of the negotiations. I think the Iranians are playing with the information. First, they didn't got the letter of President Trump. Now they are open to go back to the table. Let's see how much pressure. But I think increasing the diplomatic and economic pressure against Iran will pay off. We'll see some kind of negotiation open again. And I'm convinced that the President Trump has a different approach than President Obama at the time with the JCPOA. Any deal will be much better off for the Western world and the civilization. And if not, we have still the military options on the table.
The window of opportunity, though, is very small when we're talking about the timeline of Iran being able to break out. The longer we wait, the shorter that breakout period is going to take. Is that something we can afford?
Well, one thing is the timeline of the fissile and enriched uranium and plutonium. The second thing is the weaponization of the warhead, and the third thing is to mount it effectively in a delivery system. When you combine all three, I think you still have some latitude on time to deal with. But yes, you're right, it's shorter and shorter, and at some point there will be just a moment of decision. But in my own personal view, I think we still have some time.
There's still much to talk about Iran, but I don't want to make this, an Iran-centric discussion. And therefore, let's shift our attention to Israel's north, where we see Syria in a new reality. Basically, the fall of the Assad regime has marked the emergence of a new player, and that is Turkey.
Okay.
On the one hand, Turkey is trying to play in the European sphere. Um, do you see them succeeding there? Since there is the elites want it, but there is a strong pushback from the political class on the right of center, particularly knowing the threats that may emanate out of Ankara to European freedoms.
Well, first of all, I don't know yet if Syria is a country as such, or at least a state.
Right.
I think it's a compound of different areas, basically. Secondly, the present and the future of Syria is subjected to internal, domestic, and external pressures. But I think, at least in Europe, we tend to believe that we can go back to the past and reunite the whole Syria again under one leadership. I'm not sure, as I said before, and I think we should think about what allies do we have in the country. We have two minorities there, which has been very close to us, which are the Kurds and the Druze, and I think our efforts will be to preserve the freedom of those people and the prosperity, unless to think about recreating the Syria we had in the past, because maybe that's not possible, and we need to preserve the ones we care about in the country. You know?
There's so many Al-Qaeda apologists these days in Europe, particularly. Also in America, but also Europe, Australia. I mean, it's devastating to see what's going on there. Africa, it's, South Africa and other places, it's really alarming. But the European efforts, and, they dub themselves Europeans. They're not Europeans. They're, Syrians or Pakistanis or all kind of people who came from this region and then emigrated to Europe, and now they find themselves as Irish, which they're naturally not really. But they come out and they say, Al-Qaeda is not that bad these days.
Yeah, well, I think they don't understand a word and know what's happening and what's the goal. No? I mean, you have to look back the last week and the slaughtering of Christians and Alawites, to understand that violence is intrinsic to the jihadists. And yes, the prime minister has rejected those violence, but again, there are too many elements free to act within Syria. No? But yeah, it's sad to see that in Europe nobody cares about the Christian future of the minorities in Syria, no? Or in the Middle East at large,
or in Europe for that matter.
In Europe is more combatant activities, no, against all the faith-based Christian minorities, actually, partly because we are experienced as dramatic and radical secularization process thanks to the European Union, and secondly, and probably more importantly, because of the big minorities of Muslim population, immigrants, legal or illegal, all across Europe.
Well, we will be very proactive in protection of the Christians, irrespective. Naturally, you know me well enough to know how active we are on that front. But nonetheless, Israel, from our perspective here in Jerusalem, are looking at the various developments, and we won't sit idly by when we're talking about southern Syria in particular, but in protection of the Druze and the Christians. There are also Muslims there, Sunni Muslims, and they may test the waters here and there, but it seems like the prime minister is very firm in this position, and the leadership, the defense establishment also. Now, we don't have very much time left, and nonetheless, I'd like to ask, particularly within the strategic power competition level, how are the United States and the good actors in Europe, because there are some bad actors in Europe, but the good actors in Europe facing those challenges in a broad sense vis-a-vis the Middle East, but also on the North Africa part, which it seems like there's an encroachment of Russia, of China, from the Sahel all the way to, even in Libya, we see all the troops from Russia that came from Syria were diverted to the Haftar areas of eastern Libya.
Well, the problem in Europe, basically, is that we are much more concerned with President Trump, with President Xi Jinping. and that's a problem, a strategic problem. But yes, I think we are facing a dramatic shift in the region. The Chinese presence is increasing, and we need to take that into consideration. Unfortunately, as I said, the leaders in Europe are now moving and acting like headless chicken because they are afraid that America is abandoning Europe and that the Russia will conquer the whole Europe, even if Putin never mentioned that. No? But and we are just concentrated in this hysteria, unfortunately. But the Chinese are the real ones which are benefiting from everything. So I think
even though their economy is in decline.
Yeah, the economy, the population.
Can we make an analogy here? Because I think it's important for the viewers to know. Before the Japanese launched their attack on Pearl Harbor, their economy was in decline.
Yeah.
The Japanese empire launched its attack from a position of weakness, knowing that it's only going to become weaker, and therefore it made its own risk assessments and decided, okay, we're going to neutralize the Pacific Fleet and then conquer the Dutch Indies, where the oil, obviously, revenues were extracted from. Is that an analogy we can also hold for China, which seemingly is hiding much of the actual numbers with regard to its economic capacity?
Yeah, I think the Chinese are in decline, or at least in a long-term crisis, economically and demographically. And they may think that they are now better off if they do something that wait 5 years in time or 10 years in time. They will be in much weaker position. So sometimes the consciousness of decline gives you some incentive to be more aggressive, unfortunately. In the past, in the history, is full of examples. And that's something that we need to take into consideration as well, particularly in the area of Taiwan and Japan and the Pacific. Yes.
Dr. Rafael Bardaji, true friend, and genuinely, I appreciate you every time you come around.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition of TV7's Editor's Note, which we will have a couple of additional productions of this program in particular in the near future. So stay tuned from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.